Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about some skirmishes in an important theater of the Civil War that you have probably not heard of, and guess what? West of the Mississippi. How's it going everybody? Welcome to Virtual History 360. I'm Mr. Wade and I love history, and I bet you do too. That's why you're watching this video. So remember to click the subscribe button and turn on the bell to receive notifications about future videos that you'll probably like too. Let's get started. We are continuing our countdown of the Civil War 100, which is based on Michael Lees Lanning's book. I'll post a link in the description if you'd like to pick up a copy of your own. The subject of today's video is number 94, New Mexico and Arizona. As I said in the introduction, this is an area you might not think about when we talk about the Civil War, so let's give you some background. The first thing you need to know is that the borders were a lot different back then. After the Mexican War, the territories of the Southwest were clumped together. Now, once gold was discovered in California, it did not take long for it to become the 31st state in 1851. The Compromise of 1850 allowed it to enter the Union as a free state, and this will probably come into play a little bit later, so keep going. Take a look at this map right here though. This is from 1851. You can see California the state, but look to the east. You see what is today Arizona, New Mexico, and southern Nevada all lumped together as the New Mexico Territory. Now, fast forward 10 years to 1861. At the time of the bombardment of Fort Sumter, about a quarter of the Union's military was stationed in the West. Even though California was a free state, there were still Confederate sympathizers living there. The Union Army moved quickly to neutralize these threats, but the state was still essentially cut off from the rest of the Union. The Confederates thought that the gold of California could finance the war, but more importantly for them, it could also provide a port, a way to get to sea, that was not blockaded like the other ports that were around the Atlantic and Gulf of Mexico. So the first move would be to capture and control the territory of New Mexico and Arizona. Once Texas seceded though, that's when it really began. They began to push west and force Union forts to surrender. The Confederates allowed Union soldiers to leave the territory, and they left a small garrison behind to occupy as they continued to the next fort. John Baylor secured San Antonio and proceeded to march west with about 700 men. By the end of June, Baylor had made it to Fort Bliss at El Paso. By July 25th, they had reached Fort Fillmore with 250 men, and they intimidated the Union commander, and they forced him to surrender his 700 men, 2 cannons, 200 horses, and 300 head of cattle. And on August 1st, Baylor declared that the 34th parallel was the new border, and everything south was the territory of Arizona, and he was the new governor. Now, let's fast forward to December when Brigadier General Henry H. Sibley arrives at Fort Bliss with 3,700 troops and intends to secure the Rio Grande River all the way up to Santa Fe. His plans also called for sending soldiers to Tucson to claim Arizona for the Confederacy. I'll get to that in a bit. Around the same time, Union Colonel E.S.B. Canby established the Federal Department of New Mexico and was preparing to defend the territory. I think you can see where this is headed, right? Sibley marched north with 2,600 men in early January of 1862. There they ran into a Union force of about the same size on February 21st. It looked like it would be a Union victory until the Texans captured 4 Union canyons, turned them around, and fired on the Federals. The Confederates then continued their march, taking over Santa Fe, which had been abandoned by Canby, and then other Union forts. They turned east, hoping to break the Federal lines and control the Santa Fe Trail. Canby drew his lines about 60 miles east of Santa Fe at Apache Canyon near Glorieta Pass. Sibley tried to break these Union lines but was unable to when Union reinforcements flanked the Confederates and destroyed their supply wagons. Sibley, who was now low on supplies, began his retreat back to Texas. The Union didn't pursue him though, and they caught a lot of flack, but they said they didn't have enough supplies to feed a bunch of prisoners. That kind of makes sense, right? Now, remember I mentioned, the small group of Confederates moving west. During the same time, the Confederates that were sent towards Tucson found themselves welcomed by the locals because these soldiers meant protection from the local Indians. You have to remember that we are talking about the time before the USA completely controlled the continent and the Native Americans were still fighting back against our taking of their land. So for the Americans, it didn't matter if they were Union or Confederates. They were soldiers, and they could help them. Now, as the Confederates moved west, the commanders in California realized their end goal was their state, of course, so they sent a force of about 1,400 soldiers from Fort Yuma, and they had to fight hostile Indians on their way to face the rebels. Now, although the Confederate force was able to inflict casualties on this Union force, the greater Union numbers, almost doubling, the greater Union numbers forced them to retreat back to Texas just like Sibley did. So by the end of May of 1862, all Confederate troops were out of the New Mexico territory, and with this, California was secure from future rebel threats. Now, although these skirmishes pale in comparison to the major battles of the East, with neither side losing more than about 100 men, this was clearly the high tide of the Confederacy in the New Mexico territory. So I'd have to agree with the author, Mr. Lanning, that this makes the list. New Mexico, Arizona makes the list because the area, trying to get to California, the significance of, the general idea, not necessarily the battles themselves. So we're going to talk about the major battles a little bit later in the list, but I want you to understand, just because the fighting in New Mexico was smaller by comparison, that does not mean it was any less real or any less frightening for those who were fighting. Now, I think that about covers the New Mexico and Arizona territory. What do you think? Leave a comment below if you have any questions that I can help you with. And while you're there, go ahead and hit that like button for me. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on your alerts so you can keep up with these history videos. Between your teachers and these videos, I know you're going to rock your history class. Now, if you want to find out more, check out some of our other videos by clicking on the side over here. We have other U.S. history videos as well as civics and 360 videos. You're going to love them, so check them out. For Virtual History 360, I'm Mr. Wade. Thank you.